Dr. Sara Rabinovitch, and we'll be talking about how to embrace the idea of leadership when the term itself doesn't feel quite natural or quite right for you. And so, how do you step into your power with mentorship and actionable steps? It's a perfect focus for this season's theme of developing leadership identity. And it's great to have you on the show, Sara.
You. It's so good to be here, Mira. And I have been working with Mira for quite some time, and it's been hugely impactful. So I'm so glad to talk today and to share some about our work, which is very relevant, and some of my journey. So thank you, Mira.
Very, very kind. Sara's one of my favorite people, so very excited to have her on and actually back. You might recognize her from January 2nd. On January 2nd, we had several founding members and advisory board members from our Towerscope Leadership Academy program, and she was one of them. She was already slated to be on the show anyway. So this is round two for me and Sara. So
Yeah.
as a reminder, everybody, on the show, we discuss how to develop the nuanced, hard skills, not soft skills, needed to drive significant systemic change to make real impact through your leadership. Be ready, take notes. I always do. Reflect deeply and identify at least one small step to further develop your hard skills muscles based on what you learned today. A little bit about Dr. Sara Rabinovitch. She is a clinical psychologist by training, an expert in evidence-based therapies for anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, and traumatic stress. She's also a trainer and consultant for employee well-being and inclusion across sectors, including finance, tech, media, and athletics. And that's actually an interesting background that she has. And she's also the founder of EquiSkills app by MinMind, an on-demand research-informed app for companies that want effective, actionable solutions for their employee well-being and DEI needs. Dr. Sara is also an adjunct assistant professor in psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Keck Medical of USC, where she supervises and trains medical students. So yeah, she keeps busy.
Thank you, Mira, for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's ease into this a little bit. Sara, how did you end up from clinical psychology into app development?
Oh, quite a jump.
And all of like the integration of DEI and mindfulness and anxiety work. There's a lot of interest there.
Yeah.
How did you come to this space?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. And I know when you think about a clinical psychologist, someone who's sitting across from you and actively listening and helping you solve problems, you don't often think app
Yeah,
development.
forget that. She doesn't listen.
And
Yes.
in fact, I did not myself build the app. I could never do that. And I had a wonderful engineering team build it. But how did I get from being a clinical psychologist to there? I should say I'll even go back a little bit further, that I was an athlete. Speaking of what you were saying, I was a college basketball player way back when, 20 years now. And power forward, not that anyone asked, but and so I have always been someone who kind of like sees goal setting as being critical to moving forward in anything, whether that's perfecting your free throw, whether that's learning to overcome depression, and like whether that's figuring out how to be empowered and embodied in the workplace to climb up the ladder, if you will. And so, although they seem kind of disparate, they're very much connected. And so I was a clinical psychologist for a long time, and was doing lots of mindfulness training during COVID with different organizations and workshops and mental skills. And actually at this time met with Mira, and which was extremely fortuitous. And I was at sort of a crossroads. I was in this consultation, part of my work was building up, and I had all these organizations, nonprofit and corporate, reaching out to do DEI and mental wellness workshops and trainings and conferences. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I feel like I've hacked this weird system. Like I even was reflecting on this initial conversation that Mira and I had like 4 years ago. And she's like, you think everyone can do that? And talk about soft skills being hard skills, but I didn't know. I mean, I was a psychologist. I assumed, yeah. Through working with you, Mira, honestly, it was very, very integral to my movement into the tech sphere. After doing about 3 years of consultation work and workshops and conferences, folks were saying at the organizations, like in companies, hey, give us more resources. Like, we want our employees to be skilled up and to stay. We want to retain them. We want to capitalize on productivity. And I was like, well, I'm going to develop an app. And I developed a pretty shoddy, I'm very behavior science focused, a pretty shoddy Squarespace app that Mira actually was, I think, the second person after my wife.
I had a chance to look at it and play around with it early on. I knew her when.
And Mira, you have helped me immensely in moving through different developmental stages of this. And we are now in the beta testing stage. And so it's really exciting. And I think this journey absolutely coincided with the journey in leadership identity. So it's quite relevant to the talk today.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So with all of the roles that you've had, right? Like there's the business owner role, there's the trainer role that you mentioned, there's founder of, the app, you were supervisor and mentor to others, where they looked at you as a leader in those roles, right? But what made it hard for you to step into seeing yourself in that way?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that like the broader scope here is that like when we think about what a leader looks like, we have lots of prototypes that enter our minds. I mean, for folks who are listening to this right now, when you hear the word leader, what comes to your mind really implicitly? I mean, for me, it's a host of different cultural identities that are, white, male, taller. I guess there's shorter male leaders too, but stature is one factor in this. We think about personality characteristics like dominant and scrupulous and delegating and sometimes ruthless, all these characteristics. And so I look in the mirror and I reflect on my personality traits, and they are like, couldn't be further from those I just listed. And so like, I thought like, how could I identify as a leader? I'm a woman. I have a Jewish last name. I'm Jewish. I'm an LGBTQ community member, happily married with 2 kids, one on the way. And so I'm a mom, and I am free-spirited. I don't know if you can tell, probably from my background. I'm not the most organized person in the world, that to say the least. My wife is our family CEO, so no part of my personality fits into what this kind of prototype would convey. And so it was immensely hard for me to identify with this concept of being a leader. And honestly, it still is hard at times. My confidence ebbs and flows, as most people's probably does.
Yeah. And, this brings up a really good question. You work in the DEI space, right? So you work a lot with people's identities, but especially those from marginalized backgrounds. And you already know how important it is to have a sense of identity and to connect with it. And then what it means when that sense of identity is not accepted, it's rejected, it's invalidated in the workspace and beyond. And so I'm curious, for you, when you're thinking about leadership identity, do you see that as different? Do you see it as an important piece of when you were describing who I am and how I see myself and how we define and how we see leaders, there's a lot related to that acceptance of who I am doesn't fit into that identity, right? So I'm just sort of curious your thoughts on that.
That's such a good question, Mira. Like, and honestly, like I do think it's so important to, and I didn't actually, when I first started working with you, I was like, well, who cares if I have a leader's identity? I truly am, because I didn't know. I was, hadn't been in domains necessarily where I identified with leaders or thought it to be important. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess, and I, I'm a pretty confident person in some domains. So I was like, I don't know, do I need to identify as a leader? But I actually think it's so important, especially for folks who have marginalized identities, because it infiltrates so much. And really, Mira, I don't think I appreciated this fact until engaging with the cohort in TowerScope and working with you, that like, if you don't think you're a leader, especially if you have marginalized identities, it is going to show in how you carry yourself, in your self-talk, in the strength of your asks, in the persistence of your no's, in what you go for, what you, social justice is really important to me. Like, and as a social justice advocate, like where my voice would be completely lost if I wasn't able to embody these qualities that, and this identity of a leader. And so I think it's so important, especially for those of us who are in traditionally marginalized communities who are not seen as leaders by the majority.
That is beautifully said. I was trying to write every single word that you said there. Given that, what does it take to reconcile the perspective that we have about leadership and leaders, and the identity that we've been told we must have, versus how you see yourself, how you want to see yourself, and what you would find as supportive and embracing of who you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the way mentorship, and not just mentorship, but I think mentorship that's well matched. Like I recall from however many years ago, 5 years, because I reached out and then was pregnant and sick, and then reached out again after the babies were born, and the twins, yeah. I remember really resonating with a lot of the work that you were doing, that your team was all women, and you were training and supporting them and advocating for them, and you had done a host of like transformative projects throughout the VA, and you were launching into other spheres. And you seemed so genuine, and the questions that you asked me and the listening that felt so viscerally on point made me realize that, like, similar to when you work with a therapist, hopefully, like, you feel heard and mirrored, and not the kind of vehicle of someone else's agenda being imposed upon you. Because like you're saying, Mira, like it's an individual journey to reconcile who you see yourself as and how society sees you with the aspirations you might have, or I might have, like, to become a leader. So I think mentorship is critical, really. And thank you for yours, but
thank you. Absolutely. Let's dig into like why and how it works, right? You mentioned something about well matched. So let's dig into that after we come back from the ad break. So we are reaching an ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Dr. Sara Rabinovitch. We air Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to join our online audience and ask questions right now, we can answer them in real time. You can find us on LinkedIn or at YouTube at talkradio.nyc, and we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Branco, host of The Hard Skills, on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back with me, Dr. Mara Brancu, on The Hard Skills, and our guest, Dr. Sara Rabinovitch. We went right into it. I mean, we dove deep into identity development, how you reconcile when your own perception of your identity, and or if you're coming from an identity that is marginalized, is not reflected in, society's perceptions of leaders. How do you reconcile that? And especially when you are trying to make a difference, be noticed, have your voice heard, and and you need to sort of step into it. And so Sara started talking about how mentorship is a key to that. I totally actually didn't even connect the fact that it is National Mentorship Month. So this is perfect for this month.
Yeah.
You mentioned a well-matched mentorship. So let's get into that. What does it mean to be well-matched? Why do you need to be looking for and identifying a good match? What is a good match? If people are like, yes, I need a mentor, I want a mentor. How do I find one? What are the things that you were looking for? What are the things that you have found really help you?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I said well matched without even breaking it down in my head about what that meant. And
you can break it down now.
No, and I've been breaking it down as you've been asking the question. I was thinking well matched. I think one important feature of that is finding a mentor who has a different skill set from you, and I don't know that this is true for everyone, but I know for me that it's incredibly helpful to work with a mentor like you, Mara, who offers a very different set of skills, because having a different set of skills helps you, I think, mentor in a way that helps the person you're mentoring expand upon their skill set. And I kind of think you know this right away when you meet with someone and wonder if they'd be a good mentor for you. You think about your fit as a mentor. I think in our initial conversations, I felt myself I felt my mind expanded. I was pulled to think about things that I hadn't thought about, and from perspectives that someone who was in my brain wouldn't necessarily have. And I left our first meeting thinking, wow, I learned a lot. You know how you talk to someone, whether it's in a mentorship meeting or at work, or even someone you meet at a bar or at an airport or something, and you say, wow, you think about the conversation later because it expanded some cognitive paradigm that you have. I think that is a critical part of it, really.
Yeah. I really like this idea of complementary. A lot of us sort of feel so comfortable with the same thing that sometimes we seek a mentor who just reflects what we were already thinking. And that might be validating, and it might be supportive, and it might feel good for a short period of time, but it certainly doesn't push you to grow and think about things in different ways. And so to your credit, you thought to yourself, this is challenging me, and I like that.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
This is giving me such a different perspective, and that is something that I want. Not everybody does that calculation to fill a gap that they're experiencing, because that requires you to have enough vulnerability and insight to recognize, like, I have a gap and there's something that I'm looking for to fill it, and it will take some work for me to get there.
Totally. And to have some baseline confidence that, like, like you're saying, confidence that you can be vulnerable and that you need to grow and that it will be hard and that some things will kind of push you off kilter, but change happens when we're off kilter.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when it comes to a mentor related to leadership identity in particular, because we have lots of mentors to guide us through our careers, right? But when it comes to, like, to guide us through a leadership identity model development, leaning into it, is there anything else that makes sense to seek?
Yeah, I think one very important part is finding someone who on some cultural level can understand you, that, like, someone who has been in your shoes to some capacity before. You were trained as a psychologist and identify as a woman. And I think that is, for me, being a woman in this sphere, like, it was so important for me to have a strong female mentor when I thought about moving into a leadership domain. And I also was really looking for someone who I genuinely liked as a person and respected as a person. I know that sounds, as a psychologist, but it's very important. And I think both in conjunction. So I also think, as part of my language, choosing a mentor who can see outside their own shit, like, in leadership development is so important, since, like we've all been on journeys, and all sorts of leaders who are mentors in leadership are going through their own kind of bureaucratic catastrophes every second. And so I think having a mentor who's truly grounded and can, like, see outside their own context to help you develop your identity merely because, like, they want to help you forge your identity, not for any other agenda, I think is so important. And I absolutely have found that in our work, as I've shared with you a bunch of times.
Yeah. And I will add a few others that I've sort of learned over time are important for any mentoring relationship. And one is, it needs to feel mutually beneficial. And for the mentee, you don't always realize it actually is. Like, I had an amazing mentor who, after, a 10-year, sort of working relationship, working together, and I left my position, which meant I couldn't continue with seeking, and having his mentorship in that way for that role. I wrote him a letter, and I said, here are the 15 ways that you have impacted my life. And I'm so grateful. I so appreciate. I just don't know where I'd be, without your mentorship. And he said, Mira, you do know this was mutually beneficial, right? Like, I got as much out of it as you did, and here's the 15 things I got out of it, and I'm like, yes, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It did not occur to me, but in order for a mentoring relationship to truly work, it's often that both parties are getting something out of it, and even if you don't realize it, right? So that's one. And it sort of goes into my second point, which is that when it's lopsided, when it doesn't feel right, it's often that the mentor sees you as a narcissistic extension of them. Meaning, you're smiling because you're a psychologist, you know exactly what I mean. But for those of you who, like, are not psychologists and are like, what does that mean? That sounds loaded. Just basically meaning that they see you as someone who could play out their legacy. And so the feedback that they give you, the advice that they give you is less about you and more about their needs and how you can fulfill their needs. And it feels wrong and it feels bad and you might not know why, but that's usually a very lopsided relationship, right?
That's a good point. I think that's what I meant by seeing past your own crap, that I have never felt like a narcissistic appendage of you.
Yeah. I've been there a couple of times when mentors have introduced me, and like you could just tell, you could feel they're like walking me into the room in order to elevate their status, because like, look at this wonderful person and what she's achieved. Doesn't that make me amazing? And I'm like, ew, this feels bad.
I built you and I own you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what sort of goes into, some of the sort of thoughtful, well-matched, as you say, mentoring relationship. And when it comes to leadership identity, it's something more than that. I mean, I think there's something I feel like you were seeking that I think people would really benefit from hearing about, trying to reconcile a couple of things. What did it take to get to the point where you were like, yes, I see myself in a leadership role, even if it doesn't fit like the old traditional mold. I see myself in that way and it feels good to me.
That's a great question. I mean, it still does vacillate to an extent, and I think just based on life events and based on professional events that happen, it's very physical feeling, interestingly. It's a very physical feeling, and I began to see myself as someone who almost had physical strength, which is really interesting. But when we think about like leadership and identity, like we behaviorally have to enact certain steps, the way you mentioned in the introduction. I also realized that I no longer had tolerance for BS. I think I went through and I've been very diplomatic at times, and I think there's a lot of effectiveness in being someone who's able to be diplomatic and has those soft skills or hard skills. And my tolerance for BS now is very, very low. I got a text from someone who's not a supervisor, who's my same level as me, basically saying when can you talk today? It was a Friday. A colleague, yeah. When can you talk today? These are the times that I have available. I literally didn't even, I would feel anxious. If I hadn't come into my own, I'd be like, oh my gosh, they need to talk to me. What did I do wrong? That's who the heck is this person? I am busy all day. And then I'm getting off work at 2 p.m. and I'm picking up my twins and holding them tightly. And then I'm getting on my Vespa and I'm having fun and not thinking about this. And I think it really comes down to self-respect. And embodied self-respect.
I just wrote that on my piece of paper. Yes, it sounds like, respect for self, which helps you put the boundaries and, the messaging out there that, I respect myself and I expect other people to respect me too, just as much as I respect myself.
Yeah. Right? And then, yes, she did text me 3 days later and said, when you have a chance at your earliest convenience. And I thought, point made. Silent.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't realize how much, we train other people to treat us in certain ways, whether that's good or bad. Of course, there's some people who could not care less how you want to be treated, but we do have some control and power over that. Okay, we are actually nearing an ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dr. Sara Rabinovitch, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on talkradio.nyc.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on talkradio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dr. Sara Rabinovitch. Dr. Sara, you are a multi-talented woman who has somehow figured out a way to apply performance psychology from your athlete days and working with athletes with DEI work, with mindfulness, and anxiety and trauma stress expertise all in one, which is not something most people can imagine doing. You're like creating recipes, special ingredients to turn it into what you do. How do you see these coming together in a way that sort of meets a very unique population of people, especially leaders in organizations?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for the compliment, although I think a lot of it more has to do with being someone who just is so insatiably curious about the world and different things, and I'm constantly teaching myself all sorts of different skills. But I appreciate it. And how do all these things go together? They go together very neatly. Let me think. Well, I was talking to an athlete. We have a contract with the NCAA, and so we work with athletes through my private practice. And this athlete is injured and was saying, I don't know what the future is going to hold. A very, very smart young woman, and a woman who's from the UK who identifies as half Black and half Latina. And she's like, I don't know, what is next for me. I'm not sure, what skills I have are transferable. And so, and I was telling her, all of them in doing my a lot of leadership support of leaders and working on issues of DEI and mental wellness and looking at what makes a strong leader. Athletes have the recipe. They really do. And so if you think about it, I'll kind of use this analogy to tie it all together. Having played college basketball, you've got your basketball player. For those of you who know basketball, most people do. Let's say it's one of the big guys down by the paint. I was a big girl down by the paint, actually. And you can't tell that I'm 6 feet tall. And so we think, that's actually not that tall for a big girl down in the paint though. But so we've got this big guy, big girl, big trans non-binary person, whatever someone's identity is, down in the court. And an athlete has to make so many decisions. There's so much mental flexibility that's needed to figure out where am I going to go from here? Am I going to fake up? And am I going to go under and score? Am I going to pass it back out because I'm realizing that I'm over my head and I can't do this alone? Am I going to pivot because I'm realizing that there's this whole space that I don't even know exists and I want to learn more about it and I'm brave enough to endeavor? As I'm saying these things, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, like a leader absolutely has to do that. And when we think about like what the qualities of a leader, someone who can be fearless, someone who can stand well under pressure, someone who can pivot, someone who's a darn good teammate, someone who truly says, okay, these are my personal needs and goals. And like, what are the team's goals? Because I can't do this myself. So someone who's inherently a team player, someone who can, when we talk about stress and how that connects into this, like someone who can weather stress, who has for an athlete a stress fracture and can get up and keep going and both nurture oneself, nurture the team, receive feedback, receive nurturance, and also move forward. We think about the same with a leader who's resilient to stress, resilient to economic changes that happen and that create lots of chaos within an organization. And I think they tie in so well. And when we think about like skills, as an athlete develops skills and works on these skills and knows that they can always improve. I think that's the same for a leader. Being humble, being open, being persistent, and being flexible.
Yeah. All of these are, what I like about these is it goes beyond the sort of basics of how we define leadership from the outside, as like you said, tall, white male who is dominant and decisive or whatever. But it starts moving it into like, what is a leader offering to others and to the world? What is the environment the leader is creating for other people? And how are they reaching higher level of performance for the organization by engaging in many of these skills that are much more of an internal fortitude, as well as a lot of emotional regulation and emotional awareness.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. The skills that can't be overstated. When we look at the research on like qualities in a leader, people leave managers, not jobs. We look at qualities in leaders that are like correlated to astronomical levels with employee retention, productivity, the future of organizations. Like these soft skills, so to speak, are not soft at all. Like we're playing hardball when we think about some of those outcomes that are like well documented in the research.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, of course, when you start learning how to use these skills and embodying them, and you see the impact that it has on your team, on others, on the organization, of course, you're going to feel physical strength. Like you were saying, like the experience of physical strength that you had comes from the competency that you experience with being really effective at creating the environment that you want for yourself, right? Now, I'm going to it's not a challenge. I'm going to ask you a completely different way of looking at this. Parallel process here. How do you apply these skills to you building your business? How do you think about these same skills to you building your own business?
I think that's a really good question. And the biggest skill I think that has improved a ton in working with you and drives all of this is confidence. And it's the underlying factor here that I feel confident, even though I'm stuck in the beta stages and haven't moved and I'm trying to do all these things and I'm kind of limited in terms of my daytime availability because I've got kids. And it's like, I don't know, I constantly revisit some of our conversations and this physical feeling within me that's confident, that says like, no, I'm gonna do this. It buffers against feeling flustered. It buffers against comparisons and thinking, oh man, well, that founder's doing that. Well, yeah, that founder's single without kids and, 10 years younger and, all these different things. Like, and I think, okay, like, so it buffers against all of these factors, I think, for me. The other pieces, pivoting is so important. Oh my gosh, with my Squarespace crappy website, like, talk about a pivot. I put it out there. One of my dear colleagues, who's in a very high position as like the global director of DEI at a huge company, was nice enough to look at my Squarespace. And she happens to be a woman of color. And she said, like, I'm not going to pilot this even for free. I'm not piloting this with my team because I felt completely other during it. And then looked at me and said, what was that like? I could imagine you feeling kind of hurt. And I said, I do feel hurt. Yeah. So I think here we go, vulnerability and connection and teamwork. I do feel hurt. Like I didn't even think about that. And it was so powerful that she actually was my first beta. Her company was my first beta tester, because we've stayed in touch, and I've been humble. I'm like, we got to be teammates in this because you know so much about this. And so I think like teamwork, being open to what you don't know, being open to pivot, taking risks is a huge one that is scary, but staying the course, believing in yourself. What were some of the other ones? Finding a mentor who offers a complementary or different skill set to yours, because like, I mean, I assumed that I could beta test and launch without like formal marketing and certain like systemic procedures that are like critical when we think about like SEO and AI and all that. And you really need to expand and have the other folks who have different sets of expertise support you, and a mentor who says, hey, here's a gap, you need this, you need this, you need this.
Yeah. And some people might think, so you mentioned confidence, but then you started really going into like also having vulnerability, being humble, taking risks, and especially around the vulnerability and humility and being open to feedback, which you were incredibly open to feedback. And that's probably what it made your colleague find it so easy to give you feedback, right? Some people might think that those things are at odds with confidence, because we have this perception that you're supposed to act confident, and when you act confident, you're invulnerable, right? How do you see the two reconcile? Like, I have confidence and I'm vulnerable. I have confidence and I'm humble.
It's such a good question. And I actually was working on the manager. There's two sets of skills in the app, and part of them are manager skills, and like how to ask yourself in an algorithm fashion, like what questions factor into your decision to be vulnerable, and how and with whom, and making an informed decision about whether it will undermine your power in some way, or whether it will actually increase your power, or whether power is even a important aspect of this. Honestly, I tend to think that like being vulnerable when about things that you don't feel torn up by is the way to go. Like, and I think about this as a therapist too, like if you're still working through some of your SHIT, or as a manager, you are actually super insecure and you're like being completely micromanaged by someone above you, and then you open up about this issue that you haven't fully tackled, like, I think that you are compromising your effectiveness. That I think like vulnerability in some ways, especially when it comes from a leader downward, or a leader with other leaders, like does require like you having already done some work on this. Like, I think if I had not already done like a lot of work in like white racial identity, and looking at my biases and feeling comfortable talking about issues related to racism and anti-racist campaigns. And I think I would have been really thrown off by feedback, by the feedback that I received from my colleague. And I wouldn't have been able to be vulnerable. And I shouldn't, if I was vulnerable, like I think that would have really, really discredited my groundedness and my kind of blow a hole in my kind of showcase my ignorance and it wouldn't allow the other person to feel safe and trusting. I think it goes back to what you were saying, Mira, about how like when we find a mentor who treats us almost like a narcissistic appendage of them, like it's not helpful for anyone, and you can feel it right away.
Yeah. Lots of juicy stuff there. And I'm going to pause us right there to go into another ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills, and we will be right back in just a moment. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and with our guest, Dr. Sara Rabinovitch. We are talking about leaning into embracing your leadership identity. We've been exploring lots of different ways how to think about reconciling the difference between what we see out there, the messages we get, how we see ourselves, how we approach this. And we really started digging into, confidence versus vulnerability. What does vulnerability look like? And as a final sort of focus here, what we haven't really touched on is we've talked a lot about how we show up and what we can offer and bring to others. We haven't really talked as much, aside from the mentorship role, about our social support, our network, our community, and how that can help us lean into our growth areas, that vulnerability, that humility, the ways in which we develop the confidence needed when we're just not sure. And so I'm curious to hear, Dr. Sara, for you, what has been your experience with that aspect, the social support and community aspect, when it comes to your own growth in your leadership journey? And you're on mute.
That's a good question. I think it's such an important piece. I'm glad you bring it up. Having participated in the TowerScope beta test, was it beta test or alpha test? Beta test.
It was a beta test. Yeah, the Leadership Academy beta test was last year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things that stood out, I guess, like twofold. Like one, when I think about how to move forward and needing the support of a group, I think about the importance of like having role models within the group and also having folks with different areas of expertise. Like what I really appreciated, even within so the Leadership Academy is broken into pods. There's healthcare, there's tech, there's education. Is there one more?
Nope, that was it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like even within the pods, there were folks with like vastly different areas of expertise. like in the tech pod, for example. Like I'm a very different person than someone who's been a high-level manager at a variety of Fortune 500 companies and spearheaded, and managed 300 people. So like, and I was the only one who's a trained psychologist and could talk about burnout and talk about like working with negative thought patterns and imposter syndrome. And it was so helpful to kind of bounce ideas off in a group that felt truly safe to be vulnerable. Like these weren't, it's not folks who are even like thinking about working with you or hiring you, or you're hiring them or working with them. Like you're really truly there to provide support, encouragement, and resources to one another. And when we level the playing field like that and surround ourselves with like-minded peers who we respect greatly, who we can learn from, and who we can be vulnerable with as we explore our own leadership identities, like there's no more ripe of a soil to really grow into whatever flower, plant, vegetable you want to become. And I think it takes those three ingredients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, I'm recalling my own sort of areas of growth as I've, navigated my own leadership journey. And yes, it took mentorship, and that was critical. And every time I surrounded myself with, people that I admired, especially women in leadership, because you don't see that as often, right? People who sort of represent your experience in some way, and you can see yourself through them, right? But especially like ones that were non-competitive, right? Did not feel a need to compete with me, but really were supportive, challenging, pushing me just enough, because they were just as excited about my own growth, as they were about their personal journey and mine, right? And I was, and that makes such a difference as compared to when you find yourself surrounded by people who are naysayers, who are pessimists about your future, who, give you messages that they are anxious or nervous for you, so you might as well not try, who limit your risk-taking because they haven't worked through their own, experiences with that, right?
Yeah. And who conveys subtle hostility. Like I was thinking about like how you can really trust someone and like be in a group setting. And like when we decipher like who we're going to trust, I do a lot of work with polyvagal theory. Like when we decipher who we're going to trust, we're literally looking at these regions of the eyes and the mouth that convey either like a fake smile or a real smile, and we know right away if someone feels anxious for our success, if someone feels threatened by us, if someone's saying one thing but their face is saying something else. We feel anxiety in our bodies because there's discordance, and listening to that gut feeling, that's part of what I learned from you, Mira. And this is like when you feel like when something feels off, something is off, and listening to it.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. We talked about a lot of things today. What is the one thing that you would like people to take away from today?
I want people to know that like it's okay to dream. And I don't know, I read a book a long time ago by a colleague, Scott Provenance, that was called Fail to Learn, and all about this premise that like the only way we learn by failing over and over and taking those risks, because if you don't take those risks, we never know what happens on the other side. But also like we miss out on so many learning experiences that become the foundation of our work. And take risks, believe in yourself, and surround yourself with a mentor and a mentoring group of colleagues who in your gut you can tell truly support you from the inside out, and so you're not going at it alone.
Yeah, that's resonating a lot, and you're reminding me of, I remember sitting at a table and my mentor commenting something I hadn't seen in myself, which is, I see you as a very brave person. You're very brave. And I thought to myself, the only reason I'm brave is because you like allowed me and pushed me to be brave. Like that, you created the environment to be brave. So totally resonating with that message from both perspectives. If people want to learn more about your work, where can they go?
My website, pacificmindful.com. I can put it in the chat. Oops. If I click on the chat, will it go there? It's
well, people won't see it, so you can
I'll
just spell it
it
out.
So Pacific, like Pacific Ocean, and then mindful, MNDFL.com. And same for my Instagram handle where I post a bunch of stuff. But check it out.
Great. And do check it out because it is beautiful. Let me just quickly share my screen here and just show people, if you're watching in the moment, look at this. How calming is this? Breathe with us, it says on the front page. Come on in, it says on the front page. It's just, the whole page is stunning and it makes you feel already calm. There's lots of information here. So please do go pacificmndfl.com. Okay, so we covered a lot today. If you would like to explore more about how we can help you with your leadership or team development services, you can check us out at gotowerscope.com. You can also learn there about the leadership academy that Sara went through that she described. So what is one thing that you take away, audience? More importantly, what's one small change you can implement this week based on what you learned from Sara? Share it with us on LinkedIn or Instagram. Sara's big on both. And find us there or at talkradio.nyc so we could cheer you on. So we're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all over the place. Okay, you can find us there. You can also find us after this recorded on iTunes and Spotify as a podcast. Please like, share, review to increase our visibility and reach. Thank you for Talk Radio for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, the host of the Hard Skills Show. And thank you for joining us today with our guest, Dr. Sara Rabinovitch. Have a great rest of your day wherever you're tuning in from. Bye, all.
Bye.